about plans for the weekend when suddenly her messages stop. Hours later, police would discover something so disturbing that even seasoned detectives struggled to hold back their emotions. Liese had been murdered in her own apartment, violently, without warning, and by someone she likely trusted. This is not just another crime story. This is a chilling tale of a young woman whose life was cut short, and a shocking investigation that peeled back layers of lies, jealousy, and betrayal. Stick with me, because over the next few chapters, you'll see how Liese's story went from a simple missing person call to a murder case that left her entire community shaken. But before we dive into the dark details, let's step back and meet Liese Dodd, the woman behind the headlines. Liese wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to end up the subject of a homicide investigation. Friends described her as bubbly, ambitious, and fiercely loyal. She worked a local insurance office, often clocking long hours, but still finding time for karaoke nights, brunches with friends, and family dinners on Sundays. Her smile lit up every room she walked into. She was the type of friend who'd answer a call at 3 a.m. without hesitation. She had dreams of opening her own business one day. Maybe a boutique filled with the vintage clothes she loved so much. To everyone who knew her, Liese was simply unforgettable. But behind that smile, Liese was also navigating a difficult relationship. Her on-and-off boyfriend was charming to outsiders, but, as her friends later revealed, had a jealous streak that worried them. They urged her to move on, but Liese always seemed to give him another chance. That decision, whether intentional or not, would soon change everything. On the night of October 12, 2002, Liese made plans to stay in. She had Chinese takeout delivered to her apartment, settled in with her favorite rom-com, and texted a few friends before bed. Nothing seemed unusual until around 11:30 p.m. That's when her upstairs neighbor heard something, a loud thud, followed by what sounded like muffled voices. She brushed it off at the time, thinking maybe Liese had dropped something or was on the phone. By the next morning, Liese's co-workers grew concerned. She didn't show up for her shift, something she never did without calling. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail. By lunchtime, her best friend drove over to check on her. What she found would haunt her forever. Liese's apartment door was unlocked. Inside, the scene was unsettling. The takeout container from the night before was still on the counter. Her phone was charging by the couch, and her purse was left in plain sight. It didn't look like Liese had gone anywhere, but what was missing was Liese herself. The police were called immediately. At first, it was treated as a missing person case. Officers canvassed the area, spoke to neighbors, and even checked with local hospitals. No one had seen her, but within hours, the case would take a darker turn. Detectives noticed small details in the apartment, things that didn't add up. A rug in the living room was slightly bunched up, as if it had been dragged. A small streak of what looked like blood was found near the doorframe, barely visible in the dim light. And the unlocked door? Liese's friends swore she was cautious and never left it open. It was becoming clear. Liese hadn't left willingly. By that evening, detectives had their first break. Surveillance cameras from a nearby gas station showed a man, familiar to investigators, driving Liese's car around 2 a.m. He parked at the far end of the lot, got into another vehicle, and disappeared into the night. That man was none other than Liese's boyfriend. When questioned, he claimed he hadn't seen Liese in days. He seemed calm, almost too calm, but police already had doubts. Why was he driving her car in the middle of the night? Why wasn't he more concerned? Detectives began to dig deeper, and as they would soon uncover, Liese's relationship had been far more toxic and far more dangerous than her friends realized. What happened to Liese Dodd in those final hours? Who was truly responsible for her murder? And how did investigators finally piece together the chilling truth? That's what we'll uncover as we continue this video. But one thing is certain. Liese's story reminds us how quickly life can change, and how sometimes the danger we fear most comes from the people closest to us. If you've been hooked by Liese's story so far, make sure you hit subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss this video as we uncover the shocking evidence that turned this missing persons case into a full-blown murder investigation. The chilling truth about Liese Dodd's murder begins long before that fateful night. On the surface, Her life looked like something out of a magazine. A happy marriage, a beautiful home, a close-knit circle of friends. But as investigators dug deeper, they discovered cracks in this perfect picture. Cracks that revealed secrets darker than anyone could have imagined. Liese Dodd was known in her community as warm, caring, and devoted to her family. She adored her children and poured her heart into making her house a loving home. Neighbors described her as the kind of woman who always remembered birthdays, who brought cookies to new families in the neighborhood, and who never failed to flash a smile, even when her own life was hectic. Her husband, however, was a different story. Outwardly, he played the role of a charming partner and doting father, but friends of Liese began to share quiet whispers with police after her death. Their marriage, they said, wasn't nearly as perfect as it appeared. Behind closed doors, arguments flared, often about money, sometimes about his late nights away from home, and occasionally about jealousy and control. Investigators began piecing together what Liese's friends had been too polite or too afraid to voice before. Her marriage had become toxic, and Liese, though strong and caring, had confided to a few close friends that she sometimes felt trapped. One friend recalled Liese saying, "I just don't know if he loves me anymore. Sometimes I don't even recognize him." This revelation sent detectives back to the crime scene with new eyes. Suddenly, they weren't just dealing with a random act of violence or a burglary gone wrong. They began asking the most dangerous question of all. Could the person closest to Liese, the man she trusted, the man she vowed to share her life with, have been responsible for her brutal death? The deeper they dug, the more the puzzle pieces started to align. Financial troubles, late-night disappearances, suspicions of an affair, all motives that could turn a marriage sour. And in Liese's case, those motives might have turned deadly, but there was still no smoking gun, no piece of undeniable evidence tying her husband to the crime. He appeared cooperative in front of police, insisting he wanted justice for Liese. Yet detectives couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that his grief didn't quite match the devastation of a man who had just lost his wife. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Phone records, a timeline, and a witness who claimed they saw something the night Liese died. Something that didn't match her husband's story at all. The perfect marriage had unraveled into a chilling investigation, and detectives knew they were getting closer to the truth. But the truth, as it turned out, was far more shocking than anyone expected. If you're hooked by this story and want to know how investigators uncovered the real story behind Liese Dodd's murder, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our videos that, trust me, you'll want to hear what happens next. Imagine living in a neighborhood where one morning, a familiar home is surrounded by police tape. The news vans line the street, and whispers ripple through community. In March 2014, that was a reality for neighbors of Liese Dodd. What appeared to be the tragic story of a young mother's violent death soon began to unravel into something far darker. Behind the smiling family portraits and the quiet suburban life, cracks were forming. Cracks that pointed straight toward the person Liese should have trusted most. From the very beginning, investigators noticed something unusual about Stephen Dodd, Liese's husband. While grief affects everyone differently, Stephen's behavior struck detectives as inconsistent. At first, he cried and acted distraught when interviewed, but his tone seemed to shift depending on who was in the room. One neighbor recalled how, just days after murder, she saw Stephen outside laughing with a friend, a sight that unsettled many. Police always start with those closest to the victim, and naturally, Stephen was high on the list, but there was no immediate evidence linking him to Liese's death. Still, detectives pressed forward, quietly digging into his movements on the night Liese died. Stephen told investigators that on the night of Liese's death, he had gone out late to run an errand and returned to find his wife already asleep. He claimed he didn't notice anything unusual until early the next morning when he found her unresponsive, but cell phone records painted a slightly different picture. His phone had pinged off towers that placed him driving around town much longer than he admitted. To the police, this suggested he wasn't being entirely truthful about his whereabouts. When confronted, Stephen grew defensive, insisting he was too upset to remember details clearly. This evasiveness only deepened investigators' suspicions. Liese's death shocked a quiet town. She was remembered as kind, outgoing, and devoted to her children. The idea that she could have been murdered was horrifying. Local media quickly caught wind of the case, and rumors spread. Neighbors whispered about the Dodds' marriage, claiming that arguments had been heard through the walls. Friends came forward saying Liese had confided in them about marital problems. She had once told a close friend that if anything ever happened to her, look at Stephen first. Those words now carried chilling weight. As detectives probed deeper into Stephen's background, they uncovered a trail of financial problems and hidden resentments. Stephen had been drowning in debt, and Liese's life insurance policy suddenly became a point of interest. But it wasn't just the money. Investigators discovered that Stephen had been speaking to another woman, someone he had met online. Messages revealed that he complained bitterly about his marriage and even fantasized about a life without Liese. To the outside world, the Dodds appeared like a normal family. But inside their home, resentment, secrecy, and betrayal simmered just beneath the surface. The autopsy revealed that Liese had died from blunt force trauma. There were signs of a struggle. Bruises on her arms suggested she had tried to defend herself. What disturbed investigators most was the brutality of the attack. This wasn't random violence. It was deeply personal. The medical examiner also estimated Liese had been killed hours before Stephen claimed to have discovered her. This gap in the timeline became critical, pushing investigators closer to their prime suspect. While Stephen was not immediately arrested, the case against him was slowly building. Every inconsistency in his story, every lie he told, and every financial document the police uncovered made him look more like a man with motive, means, and opportunity. Still, detectives knew they needed more than suspicion to charge him. They needed hard evidence, something undeniable that would place him at the scene at the exact moment Liese was killed. And soon they would get it. By the summer of 2014, Liese's case had become a fixture in local headlines. True crime enthusiasts followed every update. Neighbors exchanged theories, and the community's trust in Stephen Dodd grew thinner by the day. Investigators were preparing to make their move. Behind closed doors, they had begun piecing together a picture of a husband who saw his wife not as a partner, but as an obstacle to his own desires. The storm was brewing, and when it broke, it would change everything. If you've been following Liese's story so far, you can see how the cracks in Stephen's story are beginning to show. But what happens next will be even more shocking as police uncover the evidence that finally turns suspicion into a case for murder. If you're finding this series as gripping as I am, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, so you never miss an update on this and other true crime cases. Imagine a courtroom packed to the brim, the air so tense you could feel it pressing against your skin. On one side, Liese Dodd's grieving family sat in silence, their faces pale with exhaustion and sorrow. On the other, the man accused of taking Liese's life, her very own husband, stared blankly ahead, stone-faced, as if nothing about this tragedy had touched him. What unfolded inside that courtroom wasn't just a trial. It was a war between truth and deception, love and betrayal, and justice versus denial. When the case finally went to trial, it immediately became the most talked-about event in the county. Reporters lined the courthouse steps every morning. Neighbors whispered outside the grocery store. For the small town where Liese had lived, the idea that a beloved mother and wife had been brutally murdered was shocking enough. But the thought that her husband might be responsible, that shattered the community's trust in everything they thought they knew about marriage, family, and loyalty. The prosecution opened with a chilling statement. Liese Dodd did not die by accident. She did not take her own life. She was silenced by the very man who vowed to love and protect her. The room fell into stunned silence. The defense immediately countered, painting a very different picture. They argued that Liese's life had been filled with struggles and suggested she may have ended her own life. Their job was clear: plant down the minds of the jury, no matter how small. Day after day, witnesses were called. Liese's friends testified about her dreams, her devotion to her children, and her growing fear of her husband. Neighbors described heated arguments they had overheard. And then came the forensic experts, the ones who could strip away lies with cold, scientific facts. One expert explained the bruises on Liese's body, noting they were consistent with struggle, not self-harm. Another revealed that the position of her injuries could only have been inflicted by another person. Each detail drew the jury closer to a chilling conclusion. Liese had fought for her life. Perhaps the most gut-wrenching testimony came from Liese's own child, who had heard the arguments between their parents and remembered their mother's desperate tone in the days leading up to her death. It was heartbreaking, and the courtroom sat in stunned silence as the child's voice trembled through the words. The defense clung tightly to the idea of reasonable doubt. They argued that the investigation had been rushed, that the police had focused too quickly on Liese's husband without exploring other possibilities. They painted him as a hard-working man under stress, wrongly accused in a time of grief. But the cracks in that story were hard to ignore. Witness after witness described a different man, a controlling, temperamental husband who had been losing his grip as Liese began to reclaim her independence. Halfway through the trial, prosecutors revealed what they called a smoking gun. Inconsistencies in the husband's timeline. Phone records showed he hadn't been where he claimed on the night Liese died. Suddenly, the defense's argument began to crumble. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The weight of the truth was becoming harder and harder to deny. Liese's family clutched each other's hands in that moment. It wasn't just about winning a case. It was about giving Liese the justice she deserved after her voice had been silenced forever. After weeks of testimony, the fate of Liese's husband was placed in the hands of 12 strangers. The jury was asked one haunting question. Was Liese Dodd murdered? And if so, did her husband do it? The town waited. Liese's children waited. And the whole country, following every detail in the news, waited. And that brings us to the moment of truth. The jury's verdict. Would they believe the prosecution's case of cold-blooded murder or the defense's plea of innocence? As we continue, we'll uncover the verdict that divided the community forever. If you're following this heartbreaking case with me, don't forget to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. The room went silent. Every eye was fixed on the jury as the foreperson stood slowly, holding the fate of Liese Dodd's family and the man accused of ending her life in their hands. For weeks, the trial had gripped the town. Now, after mountains of testimony, heart-wrenching evidence, and tearful recollections, the moment everyone had been dreading and secretly hoping for had arrived. The question on everyone's lips: would justice finally be served, or would a murderer walk free? Deliberations had begun the night before, and the jury worked tirelessly through the hours, weighing every word, every piece of evidence. They debated in hushed tones, returning again and again to the most disturbing details. The bruises, the struggle, the lies and alibis, and the chilling inconsistencies in the husband's story. For the jurors, it wasn't just about convicting someone. It was about truth. And truth, in this case, carried the weight of a life stolen. Outside the courtroom, Liese's children and family paced nervously. Every tick of the clock was a heartbeat off here. They had already lost Liese once. Could they face the unimaginable pain of losing her justice too? Every friend and neighbor who had followed the trial had the same question echoing in their minds. Would the system, so often flawed, finally honor Liese's memory? Finally, the foreperson rose, papers trembling slightly in their hands. The room fell into a tense hush. The judge gave the signal, and every ear strained to catch the words that would change everything. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of the murder of Liese Dodd. Gasps filled the courtroom. Some cried. Others simply sat frozen, unable to comprehend the release of such tension. The family's relief was immense but bittersweet. They had justice. But Liese would never come back. As the verdict sank in, the accused man remained impassive, almost eerily calm. Outside the courthouse, the news spread like wildfire. Reporters captured every reaction. Friends, neighbors, and the community at large were stunned, some in relief, some in disbelief. Liese's children hugged each other tightly, tears streaming, knowing that while nothing could replace their mother, at least her story had been heard, her pain acknowledged, and her death accounted for. The trial had not only revealed the chilling circumstances of Liese's murder, but also highlighted the importance of speaking up, investigating thoroughly, and never ignoring the signs. Liese's story became a beacon, a reminder that no one should suffer in silence, and that truth though sometimes delayed, has a way of emerging. Her memory lived on not just in her family's hearts, but also in the lessons her tragic death taught the entire community. This was the verdict that finally brought justice for Liese Dodd. But the story doesn't end here. There are still lessons, reflections, and heartbreak to explore in the aftermath of this tragedy. If you've been following this case and want to know more about what happened after the trial and how Liese's family began to rebuild, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell. You won't want to miss any of our videos. The courtroom drama was over. The guilty verdict had been read. The accused was behind bars. But for Liese Dodd's family, the hardest part was just beginning. How do you move forward when the person you loved most has been stolen from you? How do you heal when the pain is raw and the memories are haunting? The story of Liese Dodd didn't end with a verdict. It continued in the quiet, in the grief, and in the small, courageous steps toward rebuilding lives shattered by tragedy. In the weeks following the trial, Liese's children and closest relatives struggled with overwhelming emotions. There were moments of despair, anger, and deep sadness. Yet amid the grief, they found a small, fragile strength, a determination to honor Liese's life by living fully, remembering her love, and keeping her spirit alive. Counseling and therapy became a lifeline. Each family member faced the trauma differently, some through tears and conversation, others through private reflection. Community support poured in. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers who had followed the case offered messages of love and encouragement. Liese's story resonated far beyond her immediate circle. Local organizations began holding workshops and support groups for families of murder victims, and her case was cited in awareness campaigns about domestic violence and safety. Her death, though tragic, became a catalyst for change, encouraging others to speak up, seek help, and never ignore the warning signs that so tragically went unnoticed in Liese's life. The family, though grieving, took part in these efforts. They spoke openly about their experience, sharing their heartbreak to prevent others from enduring the same pain. Liese's children, in particular, grew into advocates for justice, transforming their sorrow into purpose. Healing didn't come overnight. It came in quiet, seemingly small moments. A shared memory of Liese's laughter, the comfort of her favorite meals cooked in her honor, and evenings spent telling stories about her life. Each step forward was a victory against the shadow of grief. Her children began to rebuild their routines, returning to school, engaging with friends, and finding joy in small accomplishments. These moments were bittersweet. They reminded them of what they had lost, but also of what they could still cherish. The trial had concluded, but the real work of life continued. The family understood that justice through the court system was only part of the journey. True healing required patience, love, and the courage to embrace life despite profound loss. Liese's story became a lasting lesson in resilience. While the world had witnessed a tragedy, it also witnessed the power of hope, the importance of speaking out, and the strength of a family united by love and determination. Liese Dodd's story is heartbreaking, but it's also a story of courage, advocacy, and healing. By remembering her and sharing her journey, we honor her life and raise awareness for others who may be at risk. If you want to continue following true crime stories that expose the truth, honor victims, and teach valuable lessons, subscribe to the channel now and hit the notification bell. Don't miss the stories that matter, the ones that keep the memory of victims like Liese alive.